Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do Friday Reads, where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about bookish things or just generally other things that have been going on during the week. It has been a rough week for a lot of reasons, especially if you follow the news. And I'm not really going to talk about it right now. Let's try to focus on some other things. I think there's enough going on that I don't need to talk about here. You all get it. We all deserve a little bit of an escape. So hopefully that is what I'm going to try to do here. You need the escape. I need the escape. The world is just on fire. So let's try to have a fun Friday Reads so we can get our holiday weekend off to a good start if you are in the United States. I am wearing my brand new Read with Pride t-shirt. This is an out of print t-shirt, the company out of print. But I did get it in a bookstore and I'm wearing it because I'm hoping that later today I'm going to have time to film my Pride Month Pile of Possibilities video in which I talk about the books that I will be pulling from as I get through the month of June, where I try to read LGBTQ books exclusively. I'm really excited about that. Hopefully, because my boss is traveling today, it's the Friday before a holiday weekend in the United States. So I'm hoping that today is going to be a light work day and I can use that to catch up on some videos that I've wanted to do. So there will be this one. Hopefully I'll talk about my Pride Month Pile of Possibilities. And if there's time, I'm also going to try to film my part 2 of my May book haul. If I don't, I'll do it on Monday. But just FYI, hopefully if I can get those done today, I'll schedule them to come out throughout the weekend. So obviously this will be Saturday. Hopefully this will be Sunday. And then hopefully the book haul will be Monday. But we'll see how all of that goes. That's the plan. Now let's see how the world actually works. But those will be coming, hopefully. One thing I wanted to mention this week is somebody had asked a question in my reaction to the International Booker Prize winner. The winner was Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree, translated by Daisy Rockwell. And someone asked about the size of the type, and I responded to them, but I figured it would be worth mentioning here that the type is a really good size. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but it's a pretty good size and the quality of the paper is good enough that to me, this is really easy to read. So if you're worried about the size of the type, shouldn't be a problem in this book. So don't let that put you off. But I don't know if there's an audio of this book available because I have not even looked into that. I don't think this is published in the US yet. I could be wrong about that, but I think at the time the long list or the short list was announced, it was not. So I ordered this from the UK. And here it is. So I would say, yeah, don't worry about the size of the font. It looks fine to me. And hopefully you were able to see it a little bit right there. Another thing I wanted to mention, I kind of teased this because in part 1 of my May book haul, I never do 2-part book hauls. This month it just kind of happened because I did a curated book box. I've always been curious about them. And I'll put a link to the part 1 down below with Good Neighbor Bookstore in upstate New York. I can't remember the name of the town, but if you're interested, it's all in the book haul video. And I mentioned that I found this bookstore on TikTok. TikTok is something that's kind of new to me. I have a friend who only recently discovered that I have this YouTube channel, and she was asking me if I'm on TikTok. And I said, no, I'm too old for TikTok. And she said, no, you need to be on TikTok. There's so much really good book content. And that was, I think, back in February, maybe early March. And I finally was like, all right, I'll check it out. And so I downloaded TikTok, made an account. By the way, I do not post anything on TikTok, at least not now. I'm just like someone, I'm a lurker on TikTok right now. I've been watching what other people do. So I created an account and she said, well, you will have to be a little careful to show the algorithm the kind of stuff that you're interested in. It's going to take a little while to get it to what you like. So I selected a bunch of categories that I was interested in. Not even a bunch, because I was like, I want to narrow in really specifically. So I'm going to say that I'm interested in books, movies, baking, cats and dogs. That's it. Those are the 5 things I said I was interested in. And immediately, the first like 3, 4, maybe even 5 videos that TikTok showed me were really gross medical things. So I immediately just like forced closed and was like, oh, no, that is not what I want. And then gradually over the next month, occasionally I would pick it up and try to go through. And it really did take a long time to get the algorithm to figure out what I like. It's interesting as well, because I had seen someone complaining on Twitter that TikTok's algorithm, if you live in, say, China, will show you educational content and things like that. But in the United States, the algorithm points to videos of like dance videos and people falling down and things like that. But what's funny is TikTok doesn't show me that. The algorithm has pretty quickly learned that I'm interested in book stuff, art history. I didn't say I was interested in crafts, but it's been showing me crafts, and it's been a fun thing to watch. Like, people make the wildest, most creative things, and that's fun to watch. Real estate stuff, like tours of homes and things like that. And actually, it doesn't show me very much baking at all. That's the one disappointment. And I don't get a lot of cat and dog videos, but the rest of the stuff is really interesting. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm kind of curious how many of you, if any of you, use BookTok in general. And if you do, I'd love some recommendations of good accounts to follow. I found Good Neighbor Books. I'm blanking on the name of the bookstore, but it's in Pittsburgh, I believe. And the woman who runs the bookstore opens book mail a lot in her TikToks and some things like that. I follow a couple of other bookstores. I follow an antiquarian bookstore in the UK. That is really fascinating. But if you have recommendations for ways to sort of expand on that, I'd be interested, because I do enjoy scrolling through TikTok before bed. So if you have recommendations, let me know. And if you use it, let me know. I don't think I'm going to branch into posting over there. And the other thing I'll say is it's difficult to find the type of book that I read on TikTok, or at least it has been in the beginning. There's a lot of sci-fi, a lot of romance, a lot of kind of thriller adjacent or like suspense adjacent content. And that's not quite my vibe as a reader. So I'm not finding a lot of people on TikTok who are talking about the International Booker or anything like that. Maybe it's out there. Maybe I should start actually posting, and I can be the person out there who talks about this stuff. I can be the lonely nerd. But if you know accounts that do talk about that stuff, let me know, because I gotta believe it's out there. I just think I haven't found them yet. Anyway, let's stop talking about TikTok. And just before we get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video, I want to mention that we did start watching a new TV show this week. It's not a new TV show. This continues my trend of being really behind the curve when it comes to TV shows. We just started watching Ted Lasso. I think we watched the first episode on Sunday, and we are 2 episodes away from finishing the first season. So we've kind of binged quickly. And I didn't really want to watch it when everybody was talking about it last fall, because I'm not into sports TV shows or anything like that. And it just didn't sound like anything I would be interested in. So I kind of ignored it. But then my neighbors were talking to me, and they said that they had been really skeptical of the show as well, and said we should give it a try because it's actually a really good show. And we have loved it. I know people were a little less sure about the second season, so it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get to that. But I'm really loving it. And especially in a tough week like this, it's really comforting to watch a show about a nice person who really just tries to continue being a nice person and to get people to be the best versions of themselves. So if you are in a bad headspace right now and you've been resisting Ted Lasso, I'd say check it out, because it has been a bomb in an otherwise difficult week. And with that, let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video. I finished 2 books this week. I didn't get a whole lot of reading done. We'll get into that. Let's talk about the books that I finished first. And the first one is Paying the Land by Joe Sacco. This showed up in, I think it was my most recent book haul revisit. I'll put a link to that in the description box down below if you would like to check that out. And when I did my book haul revisit, I remembered, so I've always intended to get to this book over the last year, and I never did pick it up. And I thought to myself, well, this is probably going to be a quick book for me to get through. So when we sat down Saturday morning and I wanted something to read with my coffee and my puppy, by the way, Guinness is asleep right here, but you can't see him. I picked this up thinking, you know what, I'll be able to breeze right through this. Well, it turns out this is not a graphic nonfiction book that you just breeze through. It's not at all. It's a really good book, but it's not breezable for sure. So if you're unfamiliar, this is a graphic piece of nonfiction about Indigenous people in Canada. There is some of the artwork. And it talks about the history of these people. It's much more in the last 100 years. So it talks about a time when people still grew up in the bush, living off of the land. And it talks about how the Canadian government has sort of systemically cheated Indigenous people of their land and over time made them dependent on government systems that exploited the land and degraded them to the point where they now suffer terrible rates of alcoholism, terrible unemployment rates, and the land that they live on is being exploited by fracking, which is ruining the environment. And they are in many cases proponents of fracking because they need the jobs that come along with it. So it's about how the Canadian government took the land away from them. Originally, this is pretty specifically the Northwest Territories. So originally, the government was not interested in that land because it's basically frozen. So they just kind of let the Indigenous population have the land and live off of it and not really interfere with what they were doing. At most, the beaver trade, like pelts from beavers, was they would trade the Indigenous population for those, and that was a sort of lucrative business for the Indigenous people. Over time, they realized there were a lot of resources in that area. So the government started moving in. Basically, they just kind of took advantage to the point where they gained control of the land, even through loopholes. And it's about all of that. I will say, occasionally, this book reads like a textbook. And I really wasn't expecting that. But I still read it in like 2 days. And I think it's well worth the experience because it kind of makes you mad, but it's, I would say, very essential because obviously in the United States, Native populations were treated pretty much the same, if not worse. And for that, I think it's something that everyone in North America should probably read and tangle with because there are a lot of issues in here about what has been done to the Indigenous populations of this land and the ways we have treated the land and kind of made a mess of it over time. Another thing about it that was a little bit annoying is that, let me find an example. There are a lot of instances where text kind of runs into the middle of the book, like the crease in the middle, and that makes it very difficult to read at times. I mean, it's fine in the grand scheme of things, but it's just one little thing. Like as you're reading, you have to kind of maneuver the book a little bit in order to see those spots. So those would be my two complaints. It's a little difficult to read in parts because you have to really push your way into the crease to get the text. And it does read a little bit like a textbook. So don't do what I did. Don't sit down with a cup of coffee and a puppy on a Saturday morning and think, I'm just going to breeze right through this book, because you won't breeze. This is not a breezable book. I will say it again. But it is an important book. And somebody had asked, I think on Instagram, and I haven't answered the question yet, but someone had asked what I think the best takeaway is. And I think there isn't really one takeaway. The takeaway is just how systemic a lot of the things that have been done to the Native population have been, and how we need to be aware of that and maybe make amends. So that's what I'd say about Paying the Land by Joe Sacco. The next book that I finished this week, finally, was Before Night Falls by Reinaldo Arenas, translated by Dolores M. Koch. This was the LGBTQ in translation read-along selection for April and May. And we just announced the selection. Well, we didn't announce. Jen the librarian announced the selection for June and July. Jen is doing a Pride summer instead of a Pride month, and I love that idea. I think I might plan next summer to do the same thing. But the way things are right now, in July, once Pride Month is over, I want to get back to Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. So I don't think I'm going to be doing a specific Pride summer. I'll just be doing Pride June, and then I'll still put an emphasis on LGBTQ plus reads in July and August. But I don't think I'm going to be doing a whole summer. And by the way, Kieran from Kieran Reads, Kieran Reads or Kieran Reader, I can't remember which, I apologize, had pointed out that summer, like later summer, would be a perfect time to read Tomb of Sand because August marks 75 years since partition. So I'm planning on doing this in August, thanks to that recommendation from Kieran. I'll put a link to Jen's announcement video about the winner of the vote. And you can always read the other two books that were in contention. I am certainly going to be reading the other two books that were in contention. This was the official selection for April and May, and I finally finished it. I had been going kind of slowly through this book. I liked it. It's not really anything to blame Reinaldo Arenas for. The book doesn't really have an ending, but that's because as he wrote it, he was dying of AIDS, and it kind of abruptly stops, and then the next page is his suicide note. He committed suicide because he was not feeling well and didn't feel like he was able to write anymore. So there isn't really a conclusion to wrap it up. And I do feel like I could have used that, but at the same time, given the circumstances, I don't think it's really fair to complain, except that I just did. So I accept it. It's fine. I got a lot out of this book. There are some beautiful lines. It really talks about his experience growing up as a gay man in a country that criminalized homosexuality. It talked about his experience growing up in a country that had devolved into a dictatorship, and how modes of thought and expression outside of what had been decreed as the sort of mainstream were outlawed, and you could be criminalized for doing them. Ultimately, he had to live in exile and what came to the United States, first in Miami and then in New York. And there are beautiful lines throughout. I do think the book has sort of kept the reader at arm's length a lot. It's interesting as well because I feel like in our discussion group, and the link to that will be down below, there were people who were really put off by a lot of the, not put off is the wrong word, but who were sort of surprised by a lot of the sexual content in this book. And it's rough in the beginning because when he's describing rural life as a child, bestiality comes in a little bit. But then as he grows up and becomes an adult, there are a lot of sexual encounters, and he meets people who have a lot of sexual encounters. And that part never really bothered me, maybe because when I was a teenager in the 90s in San Francisco, I remember people who were friends of my father is gay, like they would talk and have a lot of these same kind of conversations and stories and things like that. They sounded very similar. And I think of a book like Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran, which feels very difficult to access from a modern perspective because it reflects a very different world where you couldn't really have relationships as a gay person because, for one thing, they were not sanctioned by the government. You couldn't get married. Society would disapprove of them. But also, just living with another person of the same sex would kind of leave you open to being found out by other people. So for many reasons, sex was really the only escape or the only outlet to express yourself. And it's really difficult to access that from a modern perspective because things are very different now. And this book kind of reflects that same time period that you would find in Dancer from the Dance. And there are great lines. I did bookmark one passage toward the end, and this isn't really a spoiler, but he's talking about how unhappy he was in Miami. I knew I could not live in Miami. Now, needless to say, after 10 years, I have realized that an exile has no place anywhere, because there is no place. Because the place where we started to dream, where we discovered the natural world around us, read our first book, loved for the first time, is always the world of our dreams. In exile, one is nothing but a ghost, the shadow of someone who never achieves full reality. I ceased to exist when I went into exile. I started to run away from myself. And that is toward the end of the book, but I don't think it's a spoiler because I don't know how you can have spoilers for nonfiction, especially when you're this far removed from the publication of the book and from Reinaldo Arenas' life. And there has been a movie as well. I think I have the movie from Netflix. We might try to watch it this weekend. So altogether, I thought it was a good book. I didn't love it, and I did have sort of high expectations, but I'm glad I finally got around to reading it, and thank you to Jen and the LGBTQ in Translation for finally giving me the kick in the pants that I needed to do that. So those are the books that I finished. I had mentioned last week that I started Ma and Me by Putsata Reang, and I have continued to listen to it this week. But with the news and just things going on, I didn't make a lot of progress on it. I tended to favor sort of escapist listening. I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts this week instead of listening to the book. Every time I started listening to the book, I'm enjoying it. I think it's beautifully written. I think it has really beautiful things to say about multiple different things, really. And actually, I ordered a book from the Montana Book Company today and was having a conversation with Chelsea about it because Chelsea, one of the co-owners of the store, is currently reading this book as well. And she's loving it just as much as I am, if not more. And we were talking about it, and she was talking about the sort of ancestral trauma that Putsata Reang is reckoning with in this book as someone who was born in Cambodia, immigrated to the country, and deals with the trauma that her parents experienced and the expectations of her parents. And it very much also deals with refugee life and all of the fallout from that and being displaced from your own heritage and how difficult it is for her in particular, because I think she was the youngest and she grew up in America and kind of adapted to the culture a little more quickly, certainly than her parents. And it's all really interesting. And of course, she, at the point of the book where I'm at, I think I'm 33% of the way into the audio. She is only starting to dip a toe into the LGBTQ element of this book, which is that Putsata Reang is a lesbian, and her mother's expectations for her ultimately drive a wedge between them because her mother can't really accept her as a lesbian. And that's going to be a heartbreaking part of the book when I really get into that. And I do want to finish it. The lucky thing is, if I don't finish it by the end of the month, it's a perfect fit for June and Pride Month. So I kind of unwittingly did a nice book that could segue into that if need be, because I'm really enjoying it. It's just that I have favored more escapist fare when I've been listening this week. And that definitely slowed my progress in Ma and Me. But I am very much looking forward to continuing in it and finishing it. And like I said, if it continues into June, that's totally fine. And when I'm done with that, I still want to finish Disoriental by Négar Djavadi, translated by Tina Kover, I believe. It's not on the front of the book. Tina Kover. So I want to sort of transition back to this. And again, if this transitions into June, it was the runner-up for the LGBTQ in Translation read-along selection for April and May. So it would fit with my Pride Month pile of possibilities. So that's the plan for audio right now. I had started this and then I was having a little trouble accessing it. The narrative moves around in time and I was having a really difficult time orienting myself. But someone in the read-along group said that once you get over that hump, it's a good book. And actually people have really liked this book who have made their way through it. So really looking forward to getting back to this and we'll see how that goes. And then I have not decided what I'm going to do next in print. I am thinking that if there's time this weekend, I might pick up one of the books that was part of that curated book box that I opened up in my part 1 May book haul, which again will be linked down below. One of them is only 100 pages and it is short stories by a Ukrainian author. So I'm thinking I might try to fit that in this weekend and then I can transition to my Pride Month reading. I'd love to hear what you have been reading, watching, if you have made any progress on reading at all with everything going on in the news. It's difficult. It's difficult. I get it. So if you have not made progress, don't feel bad about yourself. But I'd love to hear what you've been up to in the comment section down below. And I'll leave it at that for now. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.